Just a social worker podcast where we seek to celebrate social workers with host Lori Eldred, a licensed clinical social worker in Michigan. In Michigan.
Hi, welcome to Just a Social Worker podcast with your host, Lori Eldred. I am here today with Dr. Raenece Johnson, who is the NASW Michigan president. And in addition to doing all of that wonderful work, she is the practicum coordinator and instructor at Oakland University and a newly PhD'd human. So Dr. Raenece Johnson will be our guest. And it's great to see you. I know we were talking a little bit before we started just to kind of warm up and get into the interview groove. But I just want you to, thank you. I just want you to tell me just about your current position, including your recent journey obtaining your PhD, which kudos to you, because I think I said before, getting a PhD is nothing to shake a stick at. So congrats
absolutely.
on that.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, definitely thank you for having me on. It has been an absolute privilege to kind of share the same spaces with you over the years. And so very honored to be a guest. My journey, I don't know. It really started with right after high school. I went to college. And it was not as successful as I thought it was going to be. I went to various community colleges after I left there and started a family. And after about 10, 12 years of that, I met a social worker at one of my jobs. And she said, you know, you could be doing the same work, making more money if you went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my mid-30s and I was like, okay, yes, sign me up. Like, of course I want to make more money. I have a family.
Yeah, don't we all? Yeah.
Right. And so I enrolled at the closest institution next to me, which is Oakland University. I was a transfer student. I really did not know what to expect. But I really brought in a lot of lived experience, you know, over 10, 15 years of working in working with WIC, working in kind of forensic social work. I worked in correctional facilities. I worked in group homes, residential facilities. So I brought in a lot of experience, but didn't really know where I was going or really what social work was.
That's true.
Right. I thought it was mostly like CPS foster care, and I didn't think like social work was for me. It wasn't until I took a policy class my first year, and I was like, oh, this is also social work. I want to be a macro social worker. I wanted to be someone who, you know, worked in spaces that impact the systems. And, you know, within that journey, I've been able to meet a lot of incredible people doing this work, yourself included, but a lot of folks through NASW Michigan, you know, folks along my journey at OU and Michigan State, and how I kind of landed with my PhD, which is in higher education, educational leadership, was I wanted to have more of an impact in higher education and working with students who are going to become social workers. And, you know, this PhD, it is hard work. I don't think people tell you really what to expect other than, you know, you have that orientation. They're like, all right, make sure you don't get a new job, don't start a family, don't go to jail, don't quit, don't like, that's what we were told in our orientation. Don't do all these things and you'll be able to get a PhD.
Yeah.
And they
don't life, basically. It's like, don't let life happen to you.
Exactly.
How do you control that?
Of course. And of course they, you know, kind of chuckled after that, like, you know, by the way, we know all these things happen. And in a matter of fact, all these things have happened to our students. That's why we say it. However, you can still persist. And that's really what getting a doctorate is all about. Whether it's PhD, EDD, you know, a doctorate is hard. And the classes, while they are challenging, I believe the most challenging part is when you start your qualifying exams and when you are preparing to defend for your dissertation. That's the most challenging part. You're not in a class. You don't have kind of the structure that you had in the first few years of your program. You are kind of on your own, and you have to be disciplined, and you have to kind of remember your why. And so, you know, after a few years, being on my own clock, as I always am, not kind of comparing myself to others, I persisted, and persisting is, um, just half of the journey. I'm not sure what's next. However, I'm excited for what's next. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this is also the hopes, dreams, the aspirations of my ancestors, the ones who came before me. And so that was a huge, huge responsibility for me to continue in this work with education and facilitating the education of others and creating a profession, or creating social workers coming into the profession that are knowledgeable, culturally humble, and they know where to get the information that they need, and they're critical
Yeah.
thinkers. So that's a little bit about my journey. I'm sure I'm leaving a lot of things out. But I think the most important thing is just persisting and staying uh, passionate about the things I love. That it just really kept me going and motivated me in my work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. I always love that beautiful, like, I'm also doing this is also for all the people that came before me, my ancestors, like
Yes.
that can be a profound why too, of thinking like I'm part of this really long lineage of amazing people who did not have access to the things that you have access now, right? I mean, there not so long ago, people couldn't live in certain places, couldn't get the educations that they wanted, couldn't have jobs. I mean, all of those systemic barriers written into the law as well as informally. And so
Yes.
I love, love, love that. I think that's so beautiful of thinking, not just like in this moment, but longitudinally, like this is also for all
Yes.
the people that came before me. So thank you for that. And
Dissertation
I know,
was healing work. I didn't mean to cut you off, but this dissertation was healing work for myself
Mhm,
as someone who began learning about the history of higher education and who was allowed
mhm,
access to these
mhm.
spaces, and
Yeah.
also knowing my heritage and my family who grew up in Arkansas in segregated schools
Mhm,
and picked cotton, and
mhm,
it wasn't something that was so long ago, as you said, right? Like
mhm,
this was part of my
mhm,
history, and that's really what continued to motivate me and will continue to motivate me, because as we know, there are attacks on education, higher
mhm,
education, and
mhm,
continuing this work is critical.
mhm. Yeah. As well as making sure we have a diverse representation of people in higher education.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it is, yes, things are happening now to rewrite history, one, and also when you rewrite the history, then you can prevent people from getting into it. I mean, you can create all these barriers, close these doors to individuals because we know research tells us, the information tells us, just being in spaces like a more diverse group of people that work together, the better they are. Like they perform better, they're just better humans when you're working with a diverse group of people versus being in that, like, lots of us, we get into the echo chamber, we just hear the same thing and we hear what we want to hear and get that reflected back to us. And it's good sometimes to not get that all the time, to just get
Yes.
challenged. Hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. All of that.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. What is your then I know you've talked about your journey getting to where you are now. What is your approach? Like how do you kind of approach your work? Do you have a particular I know in social work we just sometimes have all these pieces apart, but do you have a particular approach that you use when working with students, when teaching your class, when working with the social work students in the practicum that you run?
Yeah. Great question. I approach it through a social work lens, empathy, dignity and worth, social justice, a commitment to social justice. I'm very intentional about the language that I use. Um, in my dissertation work, I do a lot of work with critical race theory, and um, I approach this work through. I'm not the expert. As expert is rooted in white supremacy. I am the facilitator of the learning. And so I'm going to facilitate the learning that we have and also hold students, um, some expectations of they're going to also seek this knowledge out, right? Um, in this work, I like to, you know, really tell students that you are over your learning. You may come to my classroom and expect me to lecture and give you all the information. That's not going to be the case here. We're going to have conversations. We're going to be critical of even the information that I share. What are your lived experiences? I definitely like to elevate and amplify the voices of minoritized students in my classroom. And minoritized is really just refers to students who have been historically marginalized. So that's Black and Brown, Indigenous, queer, disabled, students who have uh, not had a fair shot, an equitable shot, or equitable start to higher education in general. If I'm being honest here, and so I elevate those voices in the classroom, where sometimes those students their voices are not amplified. And so seeing that in the classroom, and as you mentioned early, just with that diversity in those spaces, it's so needed because we're all learning from each other. That's why I said I'm not the expert. And so I definitely love to amplify the lived experiences, the voices of students. Um, in my other work, especially as a practicum coordinator, we're working with a lot of different agencies, and um, those partnerships are so essential to our program, for our students to get those experiences. And so, really just kind of approaching that work in, uh, kindness and empathy, and, uh, but also challenging. So, challenging folks in their work to provide those experience for students. Also, when it comes to our new social, well, not new, it was rolled out in
21.
2022, 2021, our educational policy accreditation standards, when they added anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so as we are we've always led by that, at least I've always led by that. Some of our agencies that we partner with need support and assistance in understanding how that translates into the work they're doing. And so being that person that comes from a place of understanding that no one is the expert on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and everyone's learning. Um, and so supporting those agencies in that work and coming from it from a social work lens. I feel like I've probably been a social worker before I even knew what social work was and didn't even realize it.
Sounds like
um,
you were. You just had to get the formal, right? That
correct.
formal designation that
Yes.
we look for through
Yes.
education or
And so
credentials. Yeah.
that's what I lead with. That's part of my life. It's um, I see it in my kids. I don't think I even realize how much social work guided me in my personal and professional life until I started seeing my kids do do what I was doing in school. And so, going to parent teacher conferences, and the teachers would say, your student is the only one who asked me how my day is going. Or, that's honoring dignity and worth, right? Of all
Yeah.
people. And, my youngest, who's in elementary, who is always asking students how they're feeling and if there's anything that she can do to support them. Like, seeing that with them is like priceless almost. And so, yeah, I definitely lead. I lead through social work. I'm guided by it.
I feel like it would be an interesting experiment to go into a classroom and pick out all the social work kids. My son
Right?
does the same of like asking his teacher like how he's doing, how his day is going. I always would hear that. Yeah, your son's so kind. He always asks me how I'm doing, how my day is going. If I'm
Yeah.
having a rough day, he'll ask about that or be like, "Hey, it looks like you're kind of having a rough day here. It's going to be okay." I'm like,
Create
"Yeah,
a
I know."
generation
Yeah.
of if not future social workers, folks who are kind, just like
Yeah.
legit kind, which is uh missing. It's definitely
Mhm.
missing in this world today. Just
Mhm.
kindness. And
Yeah.
to be um a part of that and see that,
Mhm.
it really just makes my heart just seeing that. And so I'm you're right. We could probably go to some of these K through 12 classrooms and be like, we know your parents a social worker, or you know a
Right.
social worker.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wore a social work shirt to I went on vacation a couple weeks ago to Epic Universe,
Mhm.
and I had a NASW Michigan shirt on, and it was interesting to see the reactions. Like some people are like, oh
Mm.
God. But a lot of the reactions were really warm. And in fact, one person came up to me while I was there, while I was sitting down. They were like, oh my gosh, you are like so amazing. And my aunt's a social worker. Thank you for the
Mhm.
work you do. Like not even asking the work I did. There's like, thank you for the work that you do. And like
Mhm.
it's just amazing to see the love that social workers get now.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I've had a few of those experiences. I think I shared at our board meeting. I don't know if I said that to you, but I had a woman come up to me at Pride in Grand Rapids and was like, "Thank you so much. You saved my life. You saved my son's life." And that was it's like it's social, like I appreciate that, social work feedback. And I wasn't the social worker, but just her expression of like, thank you, for being a social
Right?
worker and how helpful. And I was like, that's that's nice because I haven't always had that in my career. Usually, if I'm the social worker
Yes.
showing up at somebody's house, it's like, ugh, So to
Right.
hear now a bit more of like some positive feedback is kind of
Yes.
keeps me going. I know that.
Yeah. I mean, the
So
profession,
yeah.
let's be real, it's had its challenges within the profession.
Mhm.
And me, this is kind of the history person in me coming out about the history of social work in our profession.
Mhm.
Also, you take a
Mhm.
look at the media, most often that's what
Mhm.
people know about social work is
Yeah.
CPS, foster care.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of the media doesn't know that in some instances, it's not even a social worker who may be a part of a
Mhm.
case they're hearing in the media, but it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. They instantly kind of equate that to a
Yeah.
social worker. And so it's
Mhm.
really good to see probably within the last, I'd say, in my experience, last 5, 6 years, this shift in what social workers are doing. And so
Yeah.
people are seeing social workers in the White House. They're like, social worker? People are seeing social workers in policy. And we've
Mhm.
known this all along.
Mhm.
We know as problematic as Jane Addams might be, Jane Addams did some good work. Jane Addams was going
Mhm.
door to door doing community work, and that's
Mhm.
really what people are starting to see social work as. In addition to some newer things that we're seeing, social
Mhm.
workers kind of go into, whether that's like sports social work or um, uh,
Libraries is pretty cool.
libraries.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. That seems such
So
a great idea just because folks come
yes,
into libraries so much. You have folks coming in that are unhoused because it's cold out or they need a place
yes,
to like rest. And so it just seems like a great kind of fusion of the two of like, this is a
yes.
community spot and let's have social workers here to help people. Mhm.
Absolutely. A social work degree is as people say, a social degree, but also it's a human
Mhm.
degree. Where there
Yeah.
are people, there should be social workers, and
Mhm.
we can make a space for ourselves in any place. That's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. 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 And, I appreciate you being very honest about Jane Addams, right? Has I think she's seen as that founding mother in a more formalized way, but we also know communities have been doing some type of social work function for, hundreds and probably more than that years,
Yeah.
right? and all the other ways the orphan trains, social workers participated in taking kids right from homes and putting them on these trains out west, and even just some of the complicity in more recent events.
Yes.
Yeah, our profession does. It was something I would love to see us, kind of wrestle with, is this historical and really kind of historical experience, as well as some of the white saviorism. I think that still shows
Yes.
up, some of the implicit bias, some of the, um, just even intolerance around different religions or ways people are in relationship or community, ableism. I mean, all of the sexism that we're all struggling with because it's so embedded in our culture.
Yes.
And so I think you did say something a little earlier I corrected you on, and you're probably right about the 2022 education standards, because in 2021, it's all of the NASW Code of Ethics added
Yeah.
this real anti-racist work, as well as some of the self-care that lots of us still struggle to engage in, but even the implicit bias that still shows up in our profession in very subtle ways. And so we definitely need to wrestle with some of that. I did want to follow up. So you mentioned, and I want you to kind of define this. This is my question about using critical race theory in your approach and what that really means. I think there is a very blanket misconception about what critical race theory actually is and what it isn't. And
Yeah.
so I'd love for you to just kind of define that briefly for us so people have the correct information about what that means.
Absolutely. Critical race theory, its origin started in legal analysis in the
Mm-hmm.
1970s under a lawyer by the name of Derek Bell. Interestingly enough, at our national conference for NASW, one of his mentees was the guest speaker for the Juneteenth celebration, which was like
Oh,
fantastic. But it
nice.
has a lot of its origins in the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it started as a way to challenge the dominant narrative um, in regards to education and legal analysis. Really, it's in the title, being critical of the systems, being critical of the social norms, policies, procedures that we engage in on a day to day basis, specifically when it started within legal analysis and education. Of course, it's evolved over time with scholars such as Kimberly Crenshaw, who added
Mm-hmm.
to critical race theory with intersectionality theory and framework. Also, scholar Tara J. Yasso, who added to the community cultural wealth framework,
Mm-hmm.
noting that there is strength and resilience in communities of color. And so, even against those kind of systemic barriers, when we're critical and we can reveal those barriers, that's what CRT does. It reveals the barriers. So, let me back up a little bit. Um, for example, if in education we said, oh, Black and brown students aren't succeeding because their grades are low.
Mm-hmm.
And what a scholar of critical race theory would do is say, well, let's take a look at the systems, what's happening within their system.
Right.
And so it doesn't place blame on very particular things. It says, hey, let's be critical of the system that they're in, and let's take a
Yeah.
look at that. CRT might reveal that, okay, this student experienced some racism, which is taking a toll on their academics.
Mm-hmm.
Or this student received inadequate advising. Maybe the advisor um, was not fully trained or culturally knowledgeable on that student's circumstances. So that's what CRT does. It kind of exposes um, those overarching systems
Mm-hmm.
and the impact it takes on minoritized communities. So that's the focus on minoritized communities, just like we would look at critical um, feminist theory that's
Mm-hmm.
looking at very specifically folks who identify as women or in the academic world, they say female.
Mm-hmm.
And so CRT is just really exposing that. And what's really important with CRT in education is we got to look at the systems. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
higher education started with the notion that the only people that could access higher education was rich, wealthy white men
Mm-hmm.
who had a proximity to religion. Depending on where they were at within their religious community, they
Mhm.
were given an opportunity to attend college. Also, and that's why I talk about white supremacy, or the term expert being rooted in white supremacy. Many of those folks who started college on the colonial colleges were deemed as experts,
Mhm.
not even really having any education, maybe just kind of
Mhm.
shadowing someone. They were the experts. And
Mhm.
so a lot of that is rooted in white supremacy. And CRT kind of exposes that and says, well, wait, why were they called experts? What made them an expert? And how does race, uh, the interplay of race, the interplay of racism within our society, and what does that look like?
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry, very
Yeah.
long-winded answer.
No, I think that's so important because I think we have this idea of what it is, right? We hear in the common kind of cultural and vernacular, right? And really understanding how social work and critical race theory, critical feminist theory, like they can intertwine so perfectly because it
Yes.
isn't, we're not blaming the individual. We're looking at the systems that are contributing, right? The ways in which it starts so early about funding of public schools, right? Wealthier communities get more funding that they can use to support not just basic curriculum, but all the ways they can bring in all of the enrichment, hire really good teachers, provide after school activities, like all of these things, right? That give kids from these richer communities, which are predominantly white because of where wealth is centered, how that looks so different in Black and Brown communities, lower income communities, primarily immigrant or not English speaking communities, and like looking at all of the ways that racism and documentation status and gender and sexuality, all of that impact students because we don't live in a vacuum. We just
Absolutely.
don't, I mean, when I work with clients, I absolutely bring system stuff into the room because the things that my clients struggle with are also very like getting upset, the dysregulation, a lot of the ways we're trying to cope with what's going on are impacting us and showing up in the therapy room, right? When it's hard to meet your basics, well, of course you're going to struggle and be dysregulated, and
Yes.
your executive functioning is going to take impact, and all of those things. So I think it's important to have these conversations that what does this actually mean? How what is really happening to students?
Yes.
So
Couldn't have said it better. That is exactly
thank you.
CRT.
My master's degree is paying off. I'm like, oh, systems. I think about the systems and person, the environment stuff, right? All the
Yeah.
basics that you see in social work. So, just as we start to wrap up, what I think two questions I have for you: somebody coming into social work, new in the field, what you would like them to know, and then kind of what is next maybe for you. I know we talked a little bit off air, like I know you have just was awarded your PhD, defended it in the dissertation community and or your committee, excuse me. And so kind of what's next for you?
Yeah. I'll start with what's next for me. Rest. There's
Good.
definitely uh, resistance and rest.
Hmm.
Um, and that's part of that kind of white supremacist culture. We always got to be on the grind, always on the move. I plan to
Good
rest.
old capitalism.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
capitalism as well. I plan to rest for a little bit.
Hmm.
Hopefully share and share this information at
Hmm.
conferences and throughout other educational communities,
Hmm.
and hopefully that will um, lead to some change when it comes to supporting transfer students, specifically minoritized students and black transfer students, more specifically. I don't know if I mentioned that that's what my dissertation work is on, is how Black transfer students utilize community and campus capital in order to have a successful transition. So I hope to share this information because with higher education, there's going to be more and more students who enroll at community college aspiring to transfer to four-year institutions. And how can we make that process more equitable So my hope is to share that information. How I do that, whether it's publications or conferences or talks, I look forward to doing that in the fall. What would I want social work students to know that are coming into this profession? We're rooted in social justice. I know there's been a huge shift within the last couple of years where a lot of students are very interested in private practice. And,
Mhm.
that's one part of social work. There are so many different parts. However, I think the main part is we are rooted in social justice. Those earlier pioneers, whether we see Jane Addams or Harriet Tubman or folks in abolitionist work, some of those folks were maybe we're starting to see the creation of the profession. They were rooted in social justice, even in their time when other
Mhm.
folks may have said you shouldn't be doing this.
Mhm.
Um, it- you know, the I think I mentioned at the board meeting, kind of how I'm leading into this work is
Mhm.
that quote from the late ancestor Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, where I'm going to do what is right all the time and let the law catch up.
Mhm.
And social workers, that's really where social work. That's really kind of the sentiment for right now for this moment is there's going to be a lot of noise on the outside of what we should be doing, what's wrong, who's illegal, who's not illegal, and we have to do what's right. Uh,
Mhm.
I look at the code of ethics. Uh, Also, being in my community, I'm big on community. So being within my communities, it really helps kind of shape uh, my thinking and how I share with new social work students
Mhm.
what this work is about. Because I could get very like overwhelmed, be like, look, y'all, here's the work. Let's just keep going
Mhm.
day in, day out.
Mhm.
Nah, this work is rooted in social justice. We
Mhm.
are here to support, uplift communities that have been historically minoritized in this country.
Mhm.
Some of us are a part of we have those
Mhm.
minoritized
Yeah.
identities. And so this fight is not just for myself or my family, it's also for all the people who, may find some commonality in what we're fighting and fighting against. Uh,
Mhm.
and so while this work may be laborious, I definitely hope that the new professionals can tune into some of the work that you're doing when it comes to self care and how we are taking care of ourselves,
Mhm.
not just the superficial ways that might
Mhm.
involve, some of the ways that maybe we've heard through capitalism of self care,
Mhm.
but really kind of holding agencies accountable, holding the folks that we encounter in this
Mhm.
work accountable when it comes to our time, space, and capacity. So that's kind of what I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope to talk more about, I think that some of the work I'm looking at doing, because you're right, just the ways capitalism are like, just, get a facial or go take a bubble bath. And it's like,
Right?
those are okay. And also
Yeah.
we need to do deeper work, right? Do much better
Yes.
job about taking care of social workers and addressing some of those workplace conditions. And so I could get into
Yes.
that for probably a long time. But
Me
if
too. Yeah.
anybody was listening to this, wanted to get a hold of you,
Yeah.
is your email a good way? And I know I can
Yeah.
drop some of that stuff into the notes for the show. Um,
Yes.
if they are maybe a student of social work looking to explore social work, especially if they're, like you said, part of a minoritized group that is maybe having some barriers or just has questions, right? Like we need more in our social work programs. We need more
Yes.
people of different religions, the way they look, the way they show up, sexuality, gender, their ability status, right? There's so many ways we have lived experience that we can really pull into the field that just makes the field better. So I can add your email there if somebody wants to reach out to you.
You can definitely reach out by email. They can also find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
My username is Ray Johnson. I will be very honest and transparent. Social media, I'm very slow on
Mhm.
social media, like slow to
Yeah.
respond. So don't take it personally. I
Hmm.
definitely will reach out. But yeah, absolutely reach out to me. Just as someone had done for me before and helped me through this process.
Hmm.
That's what I'm here for. So absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate, this conversation. And really, this is my goal of the podcast of just have these conversations, talk about just different facets of social work, because you're right. There is this push a lot of us are getting into, myself included, into private practice, but that is just one way that we can get into social work. We can make an impact. We can improve communities, our smaller communities, local communities, as well as our bigger communities, and make the world just a little bit better. I feel like I know that's
Yes.
probably pie in the sky, Mary Sunshine, but I just
Yes,
really believe like that can be a very important calling, just to help things just to be a little bit better.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
I love connecting with you, and if
Mhm.
anyone needs anything, reach out. If there's a need or demand to have another conversation, I'm definitely open to it. So thank you
Okay,
so much again, Lori.
thank you. Thank you, Ray. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to Just a Social Worker podcast with your host, Lori Eldred, LMSWC. All information in this show is not a substitute for therapy and is only intended for entertainment only. Should you need help, please reach out to 988 or your local mental health resource.